The death of a child is always a tragedy. It doesn't matter how much time passes. It doesn't matter if you manage to continue with your life and have more children to love and guide on the path of life. The pain of loss never leaves you, and anything that happens related to the child you lost will affect you more than anything else. Jacob and Tashana Armstrong were a simple and humble couple from Oklahoma. Both Jacob and his wife had lived their entire lives in the small town of Tulsa, a beautiful city located just minutes from the state capital and through which the great Arkansas River flowed. Although they were both born and raised in Tulsa, neither of them had ever met in school or while doing any of their extracurricular activities, not even in line at the grocery store. They had never met, and if they had, neither remembered it. Each lived in a different neighborhood in the city, which meant that it took them 36 years to meet, when they both attended a friend's wedding. Their courtship was long, as they were both shy people with traditional ideas about how a relationship should be conducted. They dated for 2 years, and then, after a traditional and romantic proposal in front of Tashana's parents, they married and went to live together in a small house downtown. Many felt that their marriage had come too late, as they were both 39 years old when they decided to take the step of walking down the aisle. If you plan to become parents, you should start trying as soon as possible. I don't want to offend you. You know that I always support you in everything you do, honey, but women at a certain age start to have certain problems to be able to be mothers, and the older you get, the more risks you take when trying to get pregnant, her elderly mother repeatedly told Mrs. Armstrong. I want to be a mother. Both Jacob and I want to have a family of our own, but it will be when we decide, not when you think it's the right time. I'm sorry, Mom, I know how much you want to be a grandmother, but you'll still have to wait a little longer to fulfill that dream, Tashana replied, a little annoyed, trying to make her mother understand that the decision to be a mother was something that only belonged to her and her husband. Unfortunately, it took too long for Tash and her husband's wishes to come true. They tried to become parents naturally for more than a year, but never succeeded. The couple was aware that they had less and less time to try. They were already 40 years old, and the chances of conceiving a child were drastically decreasing. Therefore, although Jacob was against any type of artificial gestation procedure, the couple decided to undergo fertility treatment to increase their chances. The treatments took more than 6 months to bear fruit. It was a long process full of ups and downs, but they never gave up. The couple stayed closer than ever throughout the process, and that's how their dream of becoming parents finally came true. Or at least that's what they thought. It was impossible to imagine what would happen just a few months later, during what should have been the happiest day of their lives. It all started 6 months into the pregnancy. Tash began to feel sick and had heavy blood loss in her sleep. Upon going to the hospital, the doctors thought she had suffered a miscarriage, but luckily that was not the case. The baby is fine, but we have to recommend complete bed rest. Don't panic, but after the last test, we have multiple indications to believe that the risk of you having a premature delivery is very high. Our mission now is to try to delay that moment as much as possible. The more time the baby spends in the womb, the better. Their doctor explained to them the night Tash was admitted urgently because of the discomfort she was feeling. The Armstrongs followed the doctor's instructions and did everything they could to ensure the well-being of the baby and the mother. Unfortunately, nothing was enough. Tashana went into labor a month and a half ahead of schedule. She was losing a lot of blood, and the baby had hardly any oxygen. They had to perform an emergency cesarean section, but while doing so, there was another major complication. Tash suffered a massive hemorrhage, and the doctors could not find a way to stop it. The baby's life and the mother's life were at risk. They were running out of time, and the doctors had no choice but to stick to protocol. That night, Jacob arrived at the hospital thinking he would become a father. However, as the hours passed and the doctor gave him information about the health of his wife and his baby, he began to fear the worst. At one point, he even thought he was going to lose them both and return home alone, without family, and heartbroken. And he almost got it right. Jacob and Tashana Armstrong's son, a boy who was to be named McCade, died at birth. Doctors took too long to stop the hemorrhaging Mrs. Armstrong suffered during delivery, causing the baby to run out of air and be born lifeless. They could do nothing for him. They tried to resuscitate him for minutes, but he was too small. Little McCade never got to see the light of day. He's with God now. My little boy has not died in vain. He's now a part of something greater. He's one more angel in heaven, and I know that wherever he is, he will be happy, Jacob told the doctors after receiving the tragic news. The heartbroken couple left the hospital a week later. Tash needed a lot of care after the delivery and was still very weak, but they needed to go home and have time to say goodbye to their little boy, as they wanted. Little McCade was buried in the city cemetery, in the highest part of the city. The Armstrongs wanted their son to rest in a quiet place, away from the noise of downtown and surrounded by nature. Here, nothing can disturb our baby's rest. It's the perfect place for a soul as pure as his. Don't you think so, darling? Mrs. Armstrong commented to her husband, days after her son's funeral. You're right, my dear. This place is beautiful. Here he'll find the peace he was denied in life, replied Jacob, trying to hold back his tears in front of the small grave of his son, whom he did not even have time to meet. During the months following the fateful death of their son, the couple got into the habit of visiting his grave frequently to deposit tokens of their love, objects such as pinwheels and tiny toys. It was their way of coping with the loss of their son. Everything was going well until one morning, while they were changing the dried flowers on the grave, they realized that something strange was happening. The sentimental objects they were leaving for their son were disappearing. Who is stealing memories from my little boy's grave? Who would be capable of stealing gifts from a baby's grave? I think it's shameful that this is happening in a cemetery, a sacred place where families offer our respect to the souls that are no longer with us. It's incredible that something like this is happening to us, precisely to us, exclaimed Tash when she realized what was happening. Jacob was so upset that someone was stealing items from his son's grave that he set up a hidden camera a few meters away, hoping to catch the culprit in the act. Don't worry, honey. With the surveillance system I just installed, we'll soon get answers and be able to report the thief to the authorities, Jacob said to his wife as they ate dinner. In the days following the realization of the grave robberies, his wife had been very sad. But when she learned that the grave already had a surveillance system in place to catch the thief, she was much more relieved. Luckily, they didn't have to wait too long to find out who it was, because only a couple of days after the camera was installed, 2 suspicious people were caught on video loitering around the tomb, but their faces were not visible. Shit, I'm going to have to come back tomorrow to make some adjustments. With these images, we can't go to the police, said Mr. Armstrong, very upset when he realized that they couldn't recognize anyone in the video they had. The next day, Jacob readjusted the camera again to get a better shot and hit the nail on the head. They had a new recording, and this time on the video, they could clearly see an old man stealing a pinwheel from the boy's grave. The couple could not believe what they were seeing. The next morning, they went to the police and turned the recordings over to Deputy Chief James Logsdon of the North Enid Police Department. Upon hearing their case, Logsdon empathized deeply with the Armstrong couple's plight and set out to solve the case quickly, as his own sister had also died in childbirth and is buried just a few feet from little McCade's grave. For the policeman, it became personal. You'd be hard-pressed to find a more helpless victim than someone buried here, Logsdon told Inside Edition as they were being interviewed for the feature they were about to publish on the story of McCade and the grave robber. Police released images of the alleged thief to the local newspaper, and the tips helped identify a suspect within days. He was a 77-year-old man named Alfred Boyer, and his arrest was captured on a TV camera. The man put up little resistance when he saw the police, appeared to be disoriented, and barely spoke as officers read him his rights and placed him in the patrol car in handcuffs. What does it feel like when a stranger literally steals them, takes them from your baby's grave, and takes them away? Asked Lisa Guerrero, chief investigative correspondent for Inside Edition. It's heartbreaking. I don't have words to describe how I felt when I saw that the gifts we were giving to my son were gone, said Tashana. After viewing the evidence and Boyer's confession, the elderly man was charged with petty theft. McCade's family was shocked by what happened, not understanding what could drive a person of his age to do something so horrible. I want to ask him why he did it. It doesn't seem logical to me. That man doesn't look like a criminal. I want him to explain to me the real reason why he's done that, Mrs. Armstrong told the deputy chief of police after seeing the old man arrested and found guilty. The Armstrong family got special permission to talk to the old man to explain why the pinwheel theft had hurt them so much. The interview was also attended by Inside Edition, who recorded the whole thing. When Tashana tearfully asked him why he had taken her son's pinwheel, Boyer shrugged and replied, "I don't know, it's crazy. Normally I wouldn't do it. I'm not a bad person, I swear. But lately I don't know what I'm doing. There are days when I show up in places and I don't remember how I got there. It's all very confusing to me right now, but I promise you I am so sorry for what I did. I'm very sorry for your loss and for any harm I may have caused you with my actions." To everyone's surprise, Boyer offered a sincere apology and at the same time confessed that this attitude was not like him and that something must be wrong. Upon hearing his statement, the police decided to subject Boyer to a medical examination to check if what the elderly man was saying was true. The results of the tests left them speechless. Alfred Boyer suffers from the beginning of dementia. It's very likely that he was not aware of his actions, and that when he realized what he had done, he did not remember the reason why he had done it. This man is not a thief. He's a poor, sick old man who needs help and a lot of empathy, said the forensic doctor who examined him and deduced that Boyer was seriously ill. The Armstrongs felt terrible about finding out about the whole truth. They didn't want the man to suffer anymore, so they decided to drop all charges. "We don't want that poor man to have any more problems. It has become clear that he did not wish to steal anything, and that it was all because of the terrible disease he's suffering from. For our part, all is forgotten, and we wish him the best of luck in life. It's clear that he'll need it," explained Mr. Armstrong during his last interview for Inside Edition. After the charges were dropped, Mr. Boyer was immediately released. The old man barely remembered what had happened, but he wanted to apologize personally to the Armstrongs again for everything that had happened. Afterwards, he began a treatment to stop the effects of his dementia, but unfortunately, he will never stop. In the end, everything turned out to be a terrible misunderstanding, an accumulation of misfortunes in which the pain of some parents and the illness of an old man crossed paths to show that appearances are not always what they seem. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.